Night unfolds like velvet across an ancient landscape, and candlelight flickers against cold stone. Somewhere within the echo of a forgotten cathedral, silence hums like memory. The world outside fades, replaced by the sound of breathing, by the pulse of something older than language. Here begins a journey not through time alone, but through layers of meaning buried beneath centuries of belief. Each whisper, each glimmer of light carries a story that was never erased, only hidden beneath the cross that still stands at the center of human faith. Legends tell that beneath the surface of every holy word lies a secret melody, a vibration of love, of longing, of truth, too delicate for dogma. This story belongs to that melody. It speaks of devotion disguised as myth, of love disguised as faith, of a bond that shaped the very heart of spirituality itself. Beneath the symbols carved in stone and the hymns sung for generations, something softer moves, a current of tenderness that defies both empire and theology. Imagine the soft glow of lamps in a monastery, the air filled with the faint scent of myrrh. Scrolls rest upon tables, their ink fading like breath. A monk bends over parchment, his hand trembling as he copies words older than the walls that surround him. He pauses, sensing that what he transcribes carries a meaning too vast to explain. A secret wrapped in faith, one that speaks of human love made divine. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, whispering verses long forgotten by time. Every empire has built its story upon the cross, yet beneath that symbol lies a question that no decree could silence. What if the greatest miracle was not of power, but of love? What if beneath sacrifice and resurrection lies a lineage not of rulers, but of hearts, an inheritance written not in crown or relic, but in blood and compassion intertwined? To listen to the whispers beneath the cross is to let go of certainty, to enter the realm where faith becomes experience and where myth begins to sound like memory. Those who have sought this truth through ages of darkness have done so quietly. Artists painting clues in shadow, poets embedding it in verse, scholars risking exile to preserve a fragment of light. They understood that truth, when shouted, becomes doctrine, but when whispered, becomes eternal. To follow this path is to listen, not with ears, but with the soul, to the voice that has never ceased speaking through the silence of time. As you breathe and drift deeper into this story, let your heart remain open to wonder. Let the world slow around you and feel the stillness that waits beyond thought. For what follows is not history alone, but remembrance, a tapestry woven of love, loss, and revelation, hidden in plain sight. If you find peace, curiosity, or beauty in these words, remember to subscribe to the channel, like this film, and share your thoughts in a comment. Each gesture helps this journey continue, allowing these whispers to reach more souls, seeking the quiet truths beneath the noise of the world. Dust settles like fine snow across forgotten halls, where parchment curls and words fade into golden silence. Candles sputter in the corners of ancient libraries, their faint glow trembling against shelves heavy with centuries of secrecy. Beneath these layers of time, manuscripts breathe faintly, as if alive, preserving truths that never fit within the rigid shape of power. Monks once walked here in slow rhythm, copying verses line by line, choosing carefully which stories would survive and which would vanish into the shadows of forbidden thought. What they concealed was not heresy, but humanity, a vision of love and union that the world was not ready to hold. Hidden beneath layers of dust and caution, these texts whisper of tenderness between heaven and earth, of connection beyond obedience and law. The words describe a teacher whose heart beat with compassion, whose humanity was inseparable from divinity. Pages torn by time reveal faint passages that speak of laughter, shared meals, and eyes that held understanding deeper than words. The message they carry is simple yet dangerous. Holiness intertwined with love, faith as intimacy rather than submission. In a dim vault beneath an abbey, fragments of scrolls lie cradled in silence. Their ink, faded to brown, still pulses with the breath of forgotten voices. They speak of gospels not accepted, of letters buried by decree, of knowledge too luminous to survive the politics of faith. Each rediscovered line feels like the heartbeat of something that refuses extinction, a quiet defiance echoing through the dust. These writings hold more than doctrine. They hold the texture of human touch, the warmth of a truth that once lived openly among those who followed him. Beyond the reach of empires, the same words found refuge in hidden sanctuaries. Desert caves protected scrolls from fire, and quiet scribes preserved stories by disguising them within psalms and symbols. The faith of those who guarded these relics was not blind devotion, but devotion to memory, the will to keep love alive even when the world demanded silence. Their hands trembled not from fear, but from reverence, as they passed ink and truth from one generation to the next. Each discovery made by later centuries revealed more than text. It uncovered longing. Walking through these forgotten corridors of knowledge, one can almost hear the faint sound of quills against parchment, the whisper of prayer rising like incense. The air itself seems to hum with unspoken remembrance, as if the walls still guard what no decree could erase. Every candle flicker feels like a heartbeat, every grain of dust like a word waiting to be read again. Time may have covered these truths but not destroyed them. It only veiled them, waiting for eyes patient enough to see. Truth sleeps lightly. Even when buried beneath centuries, it stirs. The lost gospels, the hidden letters, the coded art, all carry the same pulse, one that beats quietly beneath the surface of religion, reminding humanity that love and spirit are inseparable. Those who reach toward these forgotten threads touch not history alone, but the pulse of eternity woven through every human heart. Morning light spreads across the water, its reflection bending upon the ripples of Galilee. A solitary figure walks along the shoreline, her steps leaving no mark upon the wet sand. She has been named sinner, saint, prophetess, and mystery, yet her silence has endured longer than her labels. Mary of Magdala stands at the edge of history, both within and beyond its reach, carrying a secret that neither fire nor scripture could erase. Legends once painted her in the colors of regret, yet those who looked deeper saw wisdom shining through her sorrow. She was no mere witness to divine acts, but participant in them, a keeper of understanding too profound for those who feared the power of love. Texts hidden for centuries call her the one who comprehended all, the beloved of the Master, the mirror through which divine compassion saw itself reflected in flesh. Her story hums beneath the surface of faith like a melody, half remembered by the soul. At the cross, when the world dissolved into pain and the faithful fled, she remained. Beneath a sky torn by thunder, she did not run from grief, but entered it. The image of her standing there, unbroken while the earth shook, became the first sign of resurrection, not of body, but of spirit refusing to surrender to despair. In her gaze, love did not die, it transformed. That silent endurance would later become the foundation of a legacy written in whispers, not words. Ancient manuscripts buried by cautious scribes describe her as teacher among the disciples, voice of understanding in a sea of confusion. They speak of tension, not between belief and disbelief, but between revelation and hierarchy. Her closeness to the one she followed was both sanctified and feared. She saw beyond ritual into essence, and that vision, though luminous, threatened the structure that sought control over faith. In her hands may have rested not relics of gold, but the living memory of divine union, a love that bound heaven to earth through compassion. She became the vessel of remembrance, the silent guardian of what could not be spoken aloud. Stories whispered across generations claim she carried this sacred knowledge across waters, preserving it through exile, disguising it within prayer and symbol until time was safe again. Wanderers who came after her spoke of a woman who arrived in the West bearing a light no storm could extinguish. They described her not as preacher or queen, but as someone who carried peace within her eyes. She walked through villages speaking gently of forgiveness, of balance between spirit and heart, of a love that transcended law. Wherever she passed, legends took root, sprouting into stories of the sacred feminine, the missing half of a divine equation. Through every retelling, her image has been reshaped, saintly in one age, scandalous in another. Yet beneath each veil remains the same enduring presence. She stands as bridge between human devotion and divine mystery, between what history wrote and what truth remembers. Her silence was never absence, it was preservation. Within it lived the memory of a love so complete that even centuries could not corrupt its essence. Across every coastline, in the whisper of waves, her name still breathes. She lingers in the imagination, not as shadow, but as light concealed behind glass, radiant yet unseen. Her story is not about redemption from sin, but remembrance of wholeness. Through her, the divine once found a voice in the language of love, and through that voice, the hidden lineage began to pulse quietly beneath the surface of human history. Lanterns glow in the soft evening air of Galilee, their light trembling upon the surface of vessels filled with water. Music drifts like silk between tables, and laughter mingles with the scent of bread and figs. Amid the quiet celebration, a single moment unfolds that will echo through time. What has long been remembered as Miracle may, beneath its surface, conceal a union both human and sacred. A moment when destiny clothed itself in simplicity. A gathering of family, the presence of a mother guiding servants, the subtle awareness in the eyes of those around. Everything about the scene carries a familiarity too personal for mere chance. The teacher, not yet revealed to the world, performs an act of transformation. Yet perhaps the true wonder lies not in the change of substance, but in the revelation of purpose. The water that becomes wine might symbolize more than abundance. It may mark the beginning of a covenant woven from love rather than law. Ancient traditions hold that wine represents blood, joy, and communion, the essence of shared spirit. At this feast, the first act of divine manifestation occurs not in temple or desert, but within the intimacy of marriage. Such placement cannot be accident. It suggests that holiness does not reside apart from human life, but within it, through union, through celebration, through love that reflects the eternal. Legends passed quietly among mystics and poets hint that this wedding may have been personal, that the guests witnessed a ceremony veiled in allegory. The abundance of details, he did the careful mention of vessels, of motherly counsel, of the best wine reserved for last, speaks not of spectacle, but of meaning. Transformation here becomes symbol of fulfillment, the meeting of two destinies that together embody the harmony of creation. Those who painted the scene centuries later seem to sense its deeper resonance. Within the brushstrokes of masters, gestures repeat, a hand extended in blessing, a gaze exchanged in silence, a subtle symmetry between figures that mirrors the balance of opposites. The union of divine and human becomes visible in form and color, expressed not through proclamation, but through stillness and light. Under the veil of celebration, the teacher's life changes course. The act performed at Cana initiates a path that will lead toward revelation, sorrow, and remembrance. Yet beneath all of it, the same thread endures: love as the foundation of the sacred. The wine flowing through those stone vessels may represent more than joy. It may signify the continuity of a lineage carried through devotion, hidden yet enduring. As the guests toast beneath the stars, the air hums with unseen meaning. Music fades, laughter softens, and two souls stand joined beneath the gaze of eternity. The world around them remains unaware, yet something within creation shifts. A seed has been planted, not of power, but of remembrance, a living symbol that will travel through centuries disguised as myth and parable. When silence returns to the courtyard and lanterns dim, the night seems to hold its breath. The scent of wine lingers, mingling with the cool wind off the hills. What took place within that gathering remains half-veiled by time, yet the essence of it endures, carried in the hearts of those who still listen for meaning within mystery. The water, once ordinary, has become more than wine. It has become story, symbol, and secret. The quiet beginning of something eternal. Under the vast desert sky, where the stars burn like silent witnesses, a gathering of wanderers kneels in the sand. Their white garments ripple in the wind as they chant in low, resonant tones, their voices blending with the whisper of the dunes. They call themselves the children of light, seekers of truth beyond the boundaries of creed, guardians of harmony between spirit and matter. Around them, the air hums with the stillness of ancient devotion, and the desert itself seems to listen. Far from the cities where power and doctrine took root, these mystics found refuge in solitude. They lived not by conquest but by contemplation, seeing in every grain of sand a reflection of the infinite. Each dawn began with ritual washing, not as purification from sin, but as remembrance, the acknowledgement of a divine spark dwelling within flesh. To them, humanity was not fallen, but sleeping, and their purpose was awakening. Their writings, hidden in caves and jars, speak of a balance forgotten by later centuries. The sacred union of masculine and feminine principles, the recognition that creation flows through harmony, not domination. They believed that within every heart burns a small flame, a remnant of the first light, and through prayer, silence, and compassion, this flame could be rekindled. That light, once awakened, would guide souls back toward the source from which all things arise. In the stillness of their nightly gatherings, visions unfolded like petals in the dark. They spoke of a lineage not measured by blood but by awareness, a continuity of spirit stretching from the teacher they revered to those who would carry his understanding into distant lands. Their songs spoke of a union that transcended flesh, a love so pure it needed no ceremony to be consecrated. To them, the sacred family was not an institution, but an embodiment of truth living within each believer. By firelight, they shared symbols instead of commandments, circles within circles, the shape of eternity mirrored in the curve of the moon. They used no temples of marble or gold, for their altar was the sky itself. Each star was a word, each breeze a psalm. Their teachings whispered that the kingdom of heaven was not distant, but present, hidden within perception, waiting for those who could see beyond fear and illusion. When travelers crossed their path, they spoke little, offering only bread, water, and kindness. Yet within their silence lingered knowledge deeper than any sermon. Many who encountered them returned to the world changed, carrying fragments of that stillness, that luminous certainty that life was sacred in all its forms. Over time, their influence rippled outward, shaping early communities that carried echoes of their wisdom into the heart of later faiths. Legends suggest that within their secret gatherings, stories of a divine union were told in reverent tones, of a teacher and his companion, of balance restored through love. These tales were not presented as rebellion, but as revelation, an affirmation that the divine seeks expression through connection, not separation. Within that belief lay the seed of a hidden tradition that would endure through centuries of silence and persecution. As dawn approached, their prayers rose once more toward the brightening horizon. The desert winds carried their chants across the emptiness, scattering them like seeds upon the earth. Though their communities would fade and their names be lost, their essence survived in whispers, in symbols carved upon stone, in hearts that remembered light even when surrounded by darkness. What they preserved was not religion, but resonance, the soundless music of creation still playing beneath the noise of history. Waves glimmer beneath a pale sky as a small vessel drifts away from the shores of Judea. Within it stands a woman wrapped in a shawl, her gaze fixed upon the receding land. Wind moves through her hair, as if weaving prayers into it. The sea ahead is wide and unknown, yet she sails without hesitation. Her name, once whispered in devotion and fear alike, has become legend. Mary Magdalene, bearer of memory, begins her passage across the waters, carrying within her the last light of a truth too delicate for empire. The coast behind her fades into mist, the echoes of loss dissolving into the endless rhythm of the sea. Each wave feels like a heartbeat, steady and mournful, carrying her farther from the place where everything began. She holds no relics, no scrolls, no treasures of gold. What she carries cannot be weighed or measured. It is remembrance itself, the living essence of a love that endured beyond the cross. As the vessel moves toward the west, stars rise like guardians above the horizon. Each night she prays not for safety, but for clarity, asking that her purpose remain unbroken. Legends say she was not alone, that others sailed beside her, protectors and believers, carrying with them symbols and stories meant to preserve what could not be spoken aloud. Together they formed a small constellation of faith, moving silently through waters that reflected both heaven and exile. Days become weeks and the sun burns through the salt air as the travelers reach new shores. The Mediterranean unfolds before them like a sacred map, each coastline a page upon which destiny writes in invisible ink. They arrive upon the southern coasts of Gaul, where hills descend gently into the sea. There, among olive trees and wild rosemary, the exiled woman steps onto foreign soil, her bare feet pressing into the earth as if blessing it with memory. In the villages of Provence, she finds quiet refuge. The people who meet her see something in her eyes that language cannot describe. They call her a holy stranger, a teacher who prays in silence and speaks of love without condition. She builds no church, yet hearts begin to gather around her. Beneath the shade of cypress trees, she teaches that divinity is not distant, that redemption lies not in fear, but in awakening. Her words fall like rain upon thirsty ground. Each evening she walks to the cliffs above the sea and faces east. The horizon glows faintly with the memory of her homeland. In the stillness, she offers prayer, not of lament, but of gratitude. What she carried across the water was never meant to be kept. It was meant to be shared, to take root in new soil, to bloom again in forms that even she could not foresee. Over the years, her presence transforms the land around her. Springs where she prayed become places of pilgrimage. Flowers bloom where her tears once fell. Travelers bring stories of a woman who shines with quiet radiance, whose touch heals grief, more than flesh. The legend of her journey spreads across generations, entwining myth and faith into a single strand of light. When her final days arrive, she withdraws into solitude, her dwelling carved into the stone of a hillside. Within that cave, surrounded by silence, she continues to pray for the world that has forgotten its balance. Her legacy remains not in relics, but in remembrance, in the invisible lineage of those who carry her message forward, that love and wisdom are one, and that even exile cannot silence truth. Soft valleys stretch beneath a sky the color of pearl, and the air of Provence carries the scent of lavender and stone. Villagers tell tales of a woman who came from the east, her arrival veiled in mystery, her purpose wrapped in silence. She walked with grace among them, her garments simple, her gaze luminous. Children followed her through olive groves, sensing something sacred about her presence. To them, she was not stranger, but saint, though none could name the origin of her holiness. Generations later, her story became the heart of local legend. The people of the region spoke of a small band of travelers who landed upon their shores long ago, guided by stars and faith alone. Among them, a mother and child who carried within their blood the pulse of something divine. The woman's lineage would weave quietly through families of the region, hidden in plain sight, its traces preserved in customs, in songs, in the unbroken line of reverence surrounding her memory. Provence, with its Roman ruins and vineyards bathed in sunlight, became more than landscape. It became sanctuary. Here the old faiths mingled with new beginnings, and ancient symbols took root in the carvings of chapels and the patterns of village stones. The people saw in her presence not conquest but blessing, as if heaven itself had chosen their land as cradle for a secret continuity. Beneath the quiet rhythm of peasant life, a deeper current flowed. Families whispered of descent from holy blood, not in pride, but in awe. They spoke of dreams that repeated across generations, visions of stars forming a chalice, of roses blooming in winter. In their fields and vineyards, crosses entwined with vines became emblems of unity between divine and earthly realms. Each symbol echoed a lineage unseen, yet deeply felt. Scholars, centuries later, traced these legends through dusty parish records, uncovering patterns too persistent to ignore. Names recurring across regions, symbols repeating in architecture and art, devotion passed through families like secret inheritance. Yet proof was never the point. What mattered was belief. The knowing carried in the heart that truth survives not through proclamation, but through continuity of spirit. In these same valleys the first whispers of pilgrimage began. Travelers from distant lands came seeking the place where the Magdalene once walked. They followed trails through vineyards, across ancient Roman bridges, to caves where light fell like blessing upon stone. Each step became act of devotion, a quiet acknowledgement that history holds more than it tells. Legends grew around her resting place, guarded by those who understood the sanctity of silence. Artists and monks alike began embedding her symbol, the rose, within frescoes, mosaics, and stained glass. Each petal represented an aspect of divine love unfolding through time, each thorn the trials faced by those who carried truth within fragile human hearts. Across centuries, whispers of the sacred lineage intertwined with the very soil of France. Noble families adopted symbols linked to her story, coats of arms adorned with roses and stars. Yet beneath all ornament remained the same quiet message, that what began as love between two souls became an inheritance of light passed through generations, not through power or crown, but through devotion unbroken by time. Even now, when twilight settles over the lavender fields and church bells toll across the hills, the air seems to carry a faint echo of her presence. It moves through the vineyards, through the chapels, through the stones themselves, a gentle reminder that the bloodline of spirit born of love and courage never vanished. It merely learned to live among us, disguised as humanity, shining quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. Moonlight spills across the stone walls of an ancient abbey, its reflection caught in the curve of a silver chalice resting upon an altar. Candles tremble in the still air, their flames bending as if in reverence. For centuries, poets and seekers have spoken of this vessel, the Holy Grail, a symbol that glows within the imagination of humanity like a star half hidden by cloud. Yet the secret of its nature has never been about gold or cup, but about life itself, about a lineage veiled within parable and vision. Within medieval halls, stories were told of knights who abandoned kingdoms to seek this sacred object. They rode not for riches, but for redemption, following clues buried in riddles and dreams. To the unknowing, their quest seemed madness, a chase after shadows. To the few who understood, it was an initiation, a journey inward toward the mystery of divine union, the same union that once joined heaven and earth in human form. The Grail, they said, was not an object to be found, but a truth to be remembered. Old songs of the troubadours spoke of it with tender reverence. They sang of love both pure and forbidden, of devotion that transcended law and crown. Their verses hinted at a vessel that held not wine, but blood, a living current connecting mortal and divine. Each melody wrapped this idea in metaphor, protecting it from persecution. In castles and monasteries, those who guarded this knowledge understood that the Grail represented a lineage, a family bound not by power, but by the sacred pulse of compassion. Within the courts of Europe, where ambition and faith intertwined, certain orders began to whisper of their duty to protect the secret of the Grail. They hid its meaning within their rituals, disguising spiritual truth beneath the language of chivalry. To kneel before the Grail was to acknowledge the sanctity of life itself, to recognize that divinity flows through the human heart, as wine flows through the cup. It was both symbol and remembrance, a vessel of love that refused to fade. In illuminated manuscripts, the Grail shines not as a cup, but as a rose, as light as the womb of creation itself. Artists painted it with coded beauty, a chalice surrounded by stars, a dove descending, a woman veiled in crimson. Each stroke of pigment carried the same message, that holiness is alive within the human, that the sacred has not withdrawn from the world, but remains hidden in its very flesh. Those who could read the language of symbol understood that the Grail was the bridge between mortal and divine, the eternal reminder of what once was and still is. Behind monastery doors, scholars debated its nature, while mystics simply closed their eyes and listened. They felt the Grail not as legend, but as living presence, a resonance within the soul. It was the blood of remembrance, the same current that had passed through generations since that fateful union in Galilee. When they prayed, they did not seek to possess it, for no one can own truth. They sought only to be worthy of it, to become vessels themselves, filled with the same love that once transformed water into wine. As centuries passed, the Grail moved from history into myth, from secret gatherings into stories told by firelight. Yet within those tales, something real endured. Each retelling carried an echo of the same luminous origin, the whisper that the sacred lineage still flows quietly beneath the surface of time, guarded not by knights of armor, but by souls who remember. In the hush of abbey nights, where candlelight meets stone, one might still feel that pulse, the rhythm of the Grail itself, beating softly within the heart of humanity, waiting for recognition rather than discovery. The guardians have changed their form, but not their vow. Their watch continues unseen beneath the gaze of eternity. Midnight cloaks the earth as hooves strike ancient soil, their rhythm echoing across time. Figures clad in white and crimson ride through the ages. Warriors sworn to silence, protectors of something greater than any treasure. Known to the world as the Knights Templar, they became legend and enigma alike, men of sword and prayer, whose power frightened both kings and popes. Yet behind their vows and banners lay a purpose deeper than warfare, a guardianship not of gold, but of knowledge. Born in the aftermath of crusade, these knights were said to guard the roads to Jerusalem, yet their mission extended far beyond stone and sand. In the dark recesses beneath temples, in catacombs echoing with prayer, they uncovered relics and writings forbidden to the ordinary faithful. Among these, it is said, were documents speaking of the sacred lineage, of a family line stretching back to that hidden union, preserved through time like a flame cupped within trembling hands. Their power grew swiftly, fed by mystery as much as faith. Monarchs entrusted them with fortune and land, believing them incorruptible. Yet whispers spread through courts and monasteries, whispers of secret rites, of coded symbols carved into the very foundations of their churches. Circles and triangles, roses entwined with swords, chalices concealed within crosses. Each mark carried a message understood only by initiates. Within their order, the memory of the bloodline found sanctuary once more. Beneath their discipline and armor lived devotion to something far older than the church that blessed them. Their understanding of Christ was not limited to the crucifixion, but extended to the continuity of his essence, alive through love and wisdom carried by those who remembered. They saw themselves as stewards of a truth too dangerous to be spoken, protectors of the living current flowing quietly through history. To them, secrecy was not deceit, but reverence. Within their commanderies, beneath the glow of torches, rituals unfolded that mirrored ancient mysteries. Each oath taken was not only to brotherhood, but to the preservation of light. Wine shared during their ceremonies symbolized not bloodshed in battle, but the sacred union of spirit and matter, the same truth once embodied in human form. Those who were initiated understood that their strength lay not in the sword, but in knowledge guarded by silence. As their influence spread across Europe, fear began to stir in those who could not understand their power. Accusations followed, of heresy, of idolatry, of secret worship. Yet behind the condemnations hid the unease of an institution that sensed its own narrative slipping from control. When the order was betrayed and scattered, torches of truth were extinguished across the continent, yet the flame itself survived. Legends claim that before their destruction, the Templars carried away their greatest secret, manuscripts, relics, and perhaps even the bloodline itself, to lands far from the grasp of kings. The treasure they guarded was not of coin, but of spirit, a knowledge that could alter the foundation of faith. Though their strongholds fell, their symbols endured, reappearing in art, in architecture, in secret brotherhoods that arose centuries later. On quiet nights within ruined chapels, wind moves through broken arches, echoing like whispered prayer. The stones seem to remember those who once stood watch over a secret too sacred for words. Though the Templars vanished into history, their mission did not die with them. It scattered like seeds carried by storm, taking root wherever hearts dared to seek truth in silence. Soft sunlight filters through the stained glass of a vast cathedral, painting the air with color. Ruby and sapphire lights spill across marble floors, shifting with the slow passage of morning. Each ray touches carvings that speak a language older than Latin, a language of form and proportion, of geometry and silence. Within these cathedrals of Europe lies an unspoken scripture, written not with ink, but with chisel and light. Builders of these sacred structures understood that stone could speak. Through curves of arches, through the balance of spires and shadows, they encoded the patterns of creation. Circles within squares, numbers sacred to both science and mysticism, the repetition of roses, stars, and chalices, every element carried meaning. For those who looked deeply enough, cathedrals became more than places of worship. They became instruments of revelation. Every column, every vault, every shadow is deliberate. Masons who shaped these cathedrals worked in secrecy, preserving knowledge inherited from orders long dissolved. Within their guilds survived remnants of the Templar tradition, and through them the message of the Sacred Bloodline continued. They carved chalices into capitals, roses into thresholds, and within the very dimensions of their structures they concealed mathematical codes symbolizing divine union. Visitors who wander beneath these arches often feel a peace they cannot explain. The air itself seems charged, as though it remembers something beyond prayer. An ancient vibration, the echo of creation harmonized in stone. Those who designed these spaces sought to awaken that memory within all who entered, guiding souls not toward authority, but toward recognition of their own inner light. Hidden among the sculptures, faces of women appear, serene, knowing, veiled. Some hold vessels, others roses, others look upward toward light, filtering through colored glass. These are not random decorations, but tributes to a lineage both spiritual and human. Through their placement, artists honored the balance once lost, the remembrance of divine feminine beside divine masculine, restored through beauty rather than doctrine. In the stillness of these vast spaces, silence becomes language, the hum of the organ, the flicker of candles, the echo of footsteps, all merge into rhythm that feels ancient, deliberate, eternal. Cathedrals were built not only as monuments of faith, but as resonating chambers for the spirit where geometry, color, and sound converge into one experience of presence. When twilight falls and the last rays of light retreat from the stained glass, the carvings seem to move within shadow, revealing for a moment their hidden design. The rose becomes a spiral, the chalice transforms into light, and the walls breathe like living scripture. Those who pause long enough may sense what the builders tried to say without words, that truth endures not in texts or decrees, but in the quiet harmony between matter and spirit, forever written in stone. Morning light spills across the workshops of Florence, illuminating walls brushed with gold and pigment. Canvases lean against rough stone, each one a universe waiting to be born. Artists move like priests before the altar, shaping creation with color and vision. The age of faith begins to speak a new language, one of form and shadow, of geometry and soul. Within this rebirth of art lies a deeper resurrection, a revival of forgotten knowledge that once spoke through temple and scripture, now whispered through portrait and fresco. Leonardo da Vinci, with his quiet eyes and deliberate hands, paints more than faces. He paints codes, embedding within gestures and glances a message that transcends theology. In the delicate fold of a robe, in the way a hand touches light, he conceals echoes of mysteries carried through centuries. His brush becomes the quill of the ancients, writing in color what could no longer be said aloud. Within his works breathes an understanding too profound for the age to grasp. That creation itself is the living mirror of divinity, and humanity the vessel through which it continues. Each canvas becomes a meditation, a dialogue between reason and spirit. The The subtle smile of a woman hints at knowledge untold, a serenity that seems to remember the balance lost long before her time. The geometry of her posture aligns with cosmic ratios, the same sacred proportions once carved into cathedral stone. Within her gaze lies not mystery for its own sake, but recognition, an awareness of unity between matter and light, between the divine and the human form. Artists across Europe join this silent awakening. Botticelli paints myth and scripture intertwined, portraying goddesses who carry within them echoes of the Magdalene's strength. Raphael hides numerical patterns within symmetry, each curve a reflection of harmony that existed before the world's divisions. Michelangelo, carving figures from marble, seems to release trapped souls from stone, each movement revealing the living spark imprisoned within form. Through their hands, art becomes revelation, disguised as beauty. Philosophers walk beside painters and poets, seeking not salvation through authority, but through perception. They gather in candlelit rooms where ideas flow like wine. Discussions of spirit and science, of the sacred feminine, long exiled from theology. Their speech carries the rhythm of rediscovery. Within their writings, veiled references appear to a bloodline of wisdom that never perished, a lineage not bound by birth, but by awareness. Each brushstroke, each verse, becomes both confession and clue. In the salons and studios of this new age, secrets travel through symbols rather than speech. A folded hand signifies union. A rose placed near a chalice whispers of the hidden lineage. A star positioned just above a figure's heart recalls the divine spark within. Painters hide these signs not in rebellion, but in devotion, protecting knowledge from dogma by wrapping it in beauty. Art becomes sanctuary, color the language of secrecy. Patrons commission works for churches and palaces, unaware that their walls become libraries of encrypted faith. Those who can read the language of form recognize these paintings as hymns written in pigment, prayers disguised as portraits. The Renaissance does not merely celebrate humanity, it reawakens the sacredness of being human, restoring to the flesh its forgotten holiness. When twilight descends upon Florence and the sound of bells fades into evening, light from oil lamps shimmers across unfinished canvases. Faces half-painted seem to breathe in that dim glow, as if alive with memory. Within the stillness, the artist's hidden intention remains, a vow to remind the world that the divine never left creation, that truth continues to live within the very act of seeing. Within a dimly lit monastery, a monk unseals an ancient chest bound by iron. Inside rests a manuscript wrapped in cloth embroidered with roses. The pages smell of cedar and age, their ink dark as twilight. Each letter curves with precision, each word woven with devotion. It is said that this manuscript, known to a few as the Gospel of the Rose, holds teachings long suppressed. Words that speak not of judgment but of harmony, of creation born from love rather than law. The symbol of the rose has always belonged to silence. Petal by petal, it reveals its center, yet never surrenders its mystery. Within that form lies the essence of divine balance, the outer beauty concealing an inner truth. In this hidden gospel, the rose becomes more than a flower. It is the living emblem of union between heaven and earth, between the masculine principle of creation and the feminine principle of wisdom. Each petal is a layer of consciousness unfolding toward light. Ancient mystics taught that every soul is a rose in bloom, each life a petal unfolding toward its origin. To read this gospel is to journey inward, to rediscover the sacred garden within oneself. The text speaks not in commands but in poetry, guiding the seeker to perceive divinity not as distant ruler, but as fragrance surrounding all existence. Its verses describe love as the highest form of knowledge, not desire, but the recognition of oneness beneath the illusion of separation. Those who have glimpsed fragments of the manuscript claim that it carries teachings once attributed to the followers of the Magdalene. It tells of her understanding that enlightenment comes through union, not renunciation, through the embrace of spirit within matter. The rose thus becomes her emblem, the living seal of her lineage. Within each line, the fragrance of her memory lingers, carried forward through centuries of secrecy. Throughout Europe, hidden orders preserved this symbol within their rituals. In cloisters and gardens, initiates planted rose bushes near wells or altars, believing that each bloom mirrored divine unfolding. In art, the rose appeared beside chalices, cradled in the hands of angels, or woven into crowns of light. Wherever it appeared, it carried a whisper that love is both origin and destination, that the sacred family continues through the hearts of those who remember. The words of the Gospel of the Rose were copied by candlelight, passed in secrecy from one guardian to another. Each transcription was act of devotion, each page a promise that truth would survive beyond persecution. Those who studied it learned that to awaken was not to flee the world, but to love it more deeply, to see through the veil of form into the radiance that sustains all life. When read aloud in silence, its rhythm flows like breath, neither sermon nor doctrine, but song. The voice of the reader becomes one with the words, and for a moment, the heart feels the ancient pulse of creation. Such was the power of its message, gentle enough to soothe the weary, yet strong enough to challenge the very foundations of dogma. As the centuries turned, the rose continued to bloom in secret gardens and hidden societies. Though the gospel itself vanished from public record, its essence endured, written not upon parchment, but upon the human soul. Each act of kindness, each moment of love, each gesture of understanding became its living verse, proof that the divine word does not die, it transforms, taking root wherever hearts remain open. Marble corridors stretch beneath candlelight, where portraits of forgotten monarchs gaze down with silent pride. Beneath their crowns, beneath the pageantry of empire, whispers of an older inheritance persist. Genealogists trace lines of descent through ink and title, yet there are those who believe another lineage flows quietly beneath these names. One born not of conquest, but of sanctity. Within the courts of Europe, behind veils of ceremony, traces of a sacred bloodline flicker like starlight behind cloud. Chroniclers of royal descent have long noted peculiar continuities, symbols repeated in coats of arms, unusual devotions within certain families, traditions that seem to blend piety with mystery. Among the emblems of power, lions, lilies, crosses, appear motifs of chalices, roses and stars, relics of the old story hidden beneath the guise of heraldry. To those who know, these marks are not decoration, but confession, subtle acknowledgments of a lineage too dangerous to name aloud. Beneath the surface of politics, marriages joined dynasties whose unions carried whispers of divine purpose. Within these alliances, traces of a forgotten memory survived, passed through generations who perhaps no longer understood what they carried. Legends tell of royal children raised with stories of a teacher whose blood still flowed in their veins, not as symbol of rule, but of responsibility, a calling to serve rather than to reign. In courts where power shifted with each generation, mystics and advisors guarded these secrets as carefully as crowns. Their loyalty was not to throne or nation, but to the invisible thread connecting past to present. Within locked libraries, hidden genealogies were copied in coded form, blending history and prophecy into one. Those who read them understood that the true heritage of these families was not sovereignty, but stewardship of an idea, the remembrance that divinity once lived among humanity. Painters who served these courts often reflected this mystery through allegory. Portraits of queens adorned with roses, kings depicted holding globes shaped like chalices, angels guiding royal infants in shadowed backgrounds, all hinted at continuity unspoken. Each gesture, each color, carried a message for those with eyes to see. The holy blood still moved through the veins of those who shaped nations, though its meaning had long outgrown its origin. As centuries unfolded, this knowledge became burden as much as blessing. The Church, sensing any threat to its authority, suppressed such stories, ensuring that divine inheritance remained spiritual, not physical. Yet legends persisted among secret circles, tales of heirs hidden, of manuscripts that could rewrite history, of a truth so profound that even monarchs feared its revelation. Across France, Spain, and Britain, families claimed descent from ancient figures linked to the Magdalene's journey. Some did so with pride, others with quiet fear. Beneath their estates, vaults held relics inscribed with unfamiliar symbols, stars, roses, and intersecting lines said to represent the union of spirit and matter. Whether these claims held truth or merely longing, the idea itself endured, feeding the imagination of generations who sensed that history concealed more than it revealed. When night descends upon the old castles and halls, wind moves through corridors once filled with whispers. The portraits seem to lean closer, their eyes alive with secrets they cannot speak. Beneath their crowns rests the memory of a legacy that transcends power, a current of light carried through centuries of shadow. Though the world sees them as kings and queens, perhaps they were guardians too, keepers of a remembrance that love, not dominion, is the truest mark of divine descent. Dawn breaks over a city of bells and stone, their echoes rising through the narrow streets like incense. Cloisters stir to life, robes sweeping across marble floors polished by centuries of devotion. Yet beneath this rhythm of faith, a silence heavier than prayer lingers. Power, when cloaked in sanctity, casts long shadows. What began as devotion to the divine slowly intertwined with the machinery of rule, and in the merging of heaven and empire, truth found itself confined behind the walls it helped to build. Within cathedrals, choirs sing of light, yet archives buried beneath those same sanctuaries conceal volumes that were never meant to be seen. Texts that spoke of balance, of unity between man and woman, of spirit within flesh, all locked away or burned beneath verdicts of heresy. The early guardians of faith feared that too much light might blind the obedient, that revelation unfiltered could unravel their authority. So the written word was sifted, reshaped, sanctified by decree, leaving behind a narrative smooth enough to control yet hollow enough to echo. Scriptures chosen by councils became the pillars of empire, while gospels of tenderness and equality faded into legend. Voices that had once sung of divine love as partnership were replaced by edicts proclaiming obedience. The sacred feminine, once honored beside the masculine, was recast as temptation or shame. Temples that had once celebrated balance were refashioned into citadels of judgment, and the mother was veiled behind hierarchy. Yet through the cracks of these walls, whispers persisted, the hum of something ancient refusing extinction. Across centuries, inquisitions turned suspicion into virtue. Scholars who dared to read forbidden texts vanished into dungeons or pyres. Painters who slipped hidden meanings into frescoes prayed their art would outlive the silence imposed upon their tongues. The Church, fearing heresy more than ignorance, built its might upon the absence of questions. Still beneath the suppression, a quiet defiance endured, the knowledge that truth, though silenced, never dies. It only learns to speak in subtler forms. Pilgrims continued to travel not only to relics of saints but to places where old symbols lingered, wells sacred to both pagan and Christian, chapels where roses bloomed beside crosses. They did not always know why they came. Something within them simply remembered. Through their prayers, the forgotten balance between heaven and earth breathed again, even if only in secret hearts. Faith, like water, finds its way through any wall, shaping stone over time until the barrier itself becomes vessel. Monks who copied manuscripts in hidden corners left coded marginalia, drawings of vines, chalices, intertwined hands. Each stroke was both rebellion and devotion, an attempt to preserve what could not be spoken. Mystics within the church cloaked their understanding in metaphor, writing of brides and lovers to disguise their insights into union of divine and human. Even those bound by vows of silence found ways to let truth slip through their fingers, like light through stained glass. For every edict that silenced a question, 1,000 hearts began to wonder. For every scripture censored, another symbol emerged in art, architecture, or dream. The very institution that sought to contain revelation became its unwilling guardian, preserving clues within the grandeur of its own monuments. Beneath frescoes, within stained glass and carved capitals, the story of divine balance continued to shimmer, unseen yet undefeated. When night falls over old cathedrals and the hymns fade into echo, one can almost feel the breath of those who kept truth alive through obedience turned to art. Their silence was not submission but strategy. They understood that even when imprisoned by shadow, light learns patience. Within that quiet endurance, the sacred lineage survived, hidden not from faith, but within it. Mist drapes the hills of southern France in a soft veil, muffling sound and distance alike. The village of Rennes-le-Château sleeps beneath the steady gaze of the Pyrenees, its church perched like a sentinel above the valley. Narrow paths wind between stone cottages, each whispering stories of centuries gone. Yet beneath this calm landscape lies one of history's strangest mysteries, a tale of gold, secrecy, and a discovery that might have carried the power to unravel centuries of faith. In the late 19th century, a humble priest named Béranger Saunière arrived to serve the local parish. By all accounts, his beginnings were modest, his duties simple. Yet within a few years, whispers began to circulate through the village. The priest who once struggled to afford candles now oversaw lavish restorations, built grand structures, and lived in quiet wealth. Visitors noticed that his church bore unusual symbols, its decorations filled with hidden meaning. Demons crouched beside angels, roses entwined with crosses, and Latin phrases that defied conventional interpretation. During the renovation of the church dedicated to Mary Magdalene, Saunière reportedly unearthed something within the altar or beneath the floor, a discovery that changed his life. The nature of what he found remains a subject of endless speculation. Secret parchments, coded genealogies, or relics of a lineage concealed since the earliest days of Christianity. Whatever it was, it drew attention far beyond the quiet valley. Letters were sent, journeys made, fortunes exchanged. The priest spoke little, but his actions revealed a burden too heavy for words. Visitors from Paris and beyond came under various pretexts. Scholars, clergy, even occultists. They sought answers in the church's cryptic imagery, decoding the positions of statues and inscriptions. Each element seemed deliberate. The alignment of stars above the altar, the painting of a shepherd pointing to an unseen horizon, the repeated motif of the Magdalene. It was as if Saunière had turned his church into a map, not of geography, but of revelation. Legends soon surrounded him like mist itself. Some said he had uncovered treasure hidden since the time of the Templars, Others believed he had stumbled upon proof of a bloodline descending from Jesus and Mary Magdalene, protected across centuries by secret orders. His sudden wealth, his cryptic writings, and his retreat into guarded silence only deepened the mystery. He died without revealing his secret, leaving behind a trail of symbols and structures that continue to confound seekers to this day. Modern researchers have traced lines from Rennes-le-Château across the landscape, linking ancient churches, standing stones, and mountain peaks into geometric patterns. When connected upon a map, these locations form symbols: pentagrams, chalices, crosses within circles, as if the very land itself was designed to preserve a hidden truth. Whether coincidence or deliberate code, the precision is uncanny, as though the geography of southern France was an altar written upon by time. Villagers still tell of nights when strangers arrived under moonlight, measuring distances between ruins, whispering beneath the cypress trees. Each new generation brings its own theories: that Saunier found royal documents, that he held proof of divine descent, that his church marks the resting place of those who fled from Jerusalem, carrying the living legacy of the bloodline. Yet what remains undeniable is that Rennes-le-Château became a mirror reflecting humanity's hunger for hidden meaning. When morning fog rolls across the valley and sunlight touches the church tower, the mystery feels alive again. The Magdalene's image glows faintly through the colored glass, her eyes fixed upon a horizon unseen. Beneath her gaze, beneath the stones themselves, something still waits. A story not entirely buried, a truth that hums through the very earth. Those who come seeking it rarely leave unchanged, for the secret of Rennes-le-Château may not rest in gold or genealogy, but in the recognition that faith itself hides the map to its own rediscovery. Across centuries, symbols have wandered like silent messengers through art, architecture, and scripture. They transcend words, carrying meaning that cannot be spoken aloud. A rose carved into stone, a chalice etched into glass, a star woven into tapestry. Each holds echoes of a truth scattered and disguised. Where history falters, symbols endure, waiting to be read by those whose vision extends beyond the surface. Within churches, monasteries, and manuscripts, certain motifs reappear with uncanny persistence. A woman holding a vessel, two intertwining serpents, the union of sun and moon. Images repeated not through imitation, but remembrance. Each representation carries layers of meaning, creation and balance, wisdom and renewal, life and death. Together they form an unbroken language, one that whispers the same message across ages: that the divine seeks union, not hierarchy, that love is the pattern underlying all existence. Artists of faith and mystics of solitude alike became translators of this hidden script. Unable to speak openly, they painted and carved, embedding fragments of revelation into their work. Within stained glass, color becomes code. Within geometry, prayer becomes pattern. Even the positioning of altars and statues follows cosmic alignment, as if every sacred structure was designed to echo the architecture of heaven. Travelers who follow these signs across Europe find repetition too deliberate to dismiss. Chapels in France mirror cathedrals in Spain, mosaics in Italy repeat motifs seen in England. Across continents, the same shapes emerge: roses encircling stars, chalices nested within circles, twin figures facing one another across thresholds. Each symbol becomes a heartbeat of continuity, a whisper that the sacred lineage has never vanished, but merely changed its disguise. Scholars who examine these correspondences speak of a secret network of knowledge, a silent dialogue between ages. Through art and architecture, truth traveled safely, while words fell victim to flame and censorship. What could not be written survived through beauty, hidden in plain sight. Every statue of a woman holding a jar, Every pattern of vine carved into stone becomes a page in a book that no counsel could erase. Those who meditate upon these symbols often describe a sensation of familiarity, as though the images awaken something sleeping within the mind. The language of symbol does not instruct, it remembers. Each shape touches the ancient memory of unity, stirring awareness that divinity resides not in distant heaven, but within the geometry of being itself. As light shifts across cathedrals, symbols move with it, revealing and concealing their forms. A rose window glows like a living mandala, casting petals of color upon stone. The chalice in glass becomes liquid with light. The cross transforms into compass. Every beam of sunlight becomes an interpreter, translating meaning to those who watch with patience. When darkness falls and candles replace day, these same symbols fade into shadow, yet their presence remains. Even unseen, they radiate quiet power, the echo of a truth older than religion, older than history itself. They remind humanity that the sacred story is not confined to parchment or doctrine. It is written in form, in light, in the silence between heartbeats. Those who learn to read that language walk no longer in blindness, for every shadow hides not absence, but promise. The eternal whisper that truth, like love, can never be destroyed, only concealed until eyes remember how to see. Candlelight flickers upon oak-paneled walls, illuminating the gathering of men and women cloaked in silence. Their eyes reflect both reverence and secrecy as symbols are traced upon the table's surface in careful precision. They call themselves brethren, yet their brotherhood transcends blood and nation. From the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons, from alchemists cloaked in allegory to philosophers guided by light, they form an invisible chain of continuity, a lineage of seekers who preserve the pulse of forgotten truth. In these quiet chambers, words carry double meanings. To outsiders, they speak of virtue, of architecture, of fraternity. To initiates, every term conceals revelation. Stone represents matter purified by spirit. Compass and square symbolize the balance between heaven and earth. Their rituals are maps of consciousness, enacted reminders of the ancient union once embodied by the sacred family whose story has been erased and rewritten 100 times. Each gesture, each vow, is a thread woven into the fabric of continuity. Centuries after the fall of the Templars, fragments of their knowledge re-emerged within these new orders. The memory of a holy lineage, once guarded by sword, now survives in symbol and ritual. Initiates pass through stages of awakening, guided not by doctrine, but by experience. The realization that the divine dwells within, that enlightenment is the rediscovery of what has never been lost. Those who reach higher degrees are said to perceive the hidden pattern behind the world, the geometry of creation mirrored within the human soul. Meetings take place in dim lodges and candlelit gardens, away from prying eyes. Documents are written in cipher, names replaced by sigils, truths concealed beneath allegory. Each oath is taken beneath the watchful gaze of unseen ancestors, those who once carried the same secret through persecution and exile. To join is not merely to learn, but to remember, to awaken a memory buried deep within the spirit, the echo of a lineage stretching back to the dawn of faith. Art and architecture once again become the chosen mediums of expression. Cathedrals, obelisks, and labyrinths carry their markings. Streets are aligned to form symbols visible only from the sky, as if the earth itself has become scripture. Within city plans and royal monuments, hidden codes of proportion and orientation whisper of a deeper design. To the unknowing, they are works of art or triumph. To the initiated, they are prayers in stone, connecting heaven's pattern with human creation. These orders do not seek power for its own sake. They understand that knowledge without humility becomes poison. Their task is to guard the flame of truth without letting it burn the world that cannot yet bear its light. Their secrecy is not arrogance, but mercy, a veil protecting mystery from misuse. For centuries, this balance has endured, revelation tempered by silence, enlightenment preserved through patience. Throughout revolutions and reformations, their influence continues quietly. Scholars, composers, scientists, and rulers alike carry within them traces of the initiatory path. Many of the world's turning points, from philosophical movements to artistic renaissances, bear the signature of those who walk this hidden road. Yet the source remains veiled, for these brotherhoods understand that the truest light asks for no recognition. When the final candle is extinguished and the brethren depart into the night, their steps fade into the hum of the sleeping city. Yet the air they leave behind hums faintly with unseen resonance, a reminder that the ancient vow still stands. Through their silence, the story of divine descent continues to breathe, unseen, unspoken, but alive within the consciousness of those who remember that truth, when whispered, travels farther than when shouted. Centuries drift like fog over forgotten landscapes, yet the rhythm of the secret lineage continues beneath the surface of ordinary life. The world has changed its garments, cathedrals replaced by skylines, parchment replaced by electric pulse, yet the current remains, invisible as breath. Those who carry the spark no longer dwell in monasteries or temples. They move quietly among the living, indistinguishable from the crowds. Their lives unfold in simplicity, yet within their hearts burns the same remembrance passed through ages of silence. Modern seekers no longer require secret oaths to feel the call of awakening. The symbols once hidden in marble and manuscript now appear through intuition, through art, through the human longing for meaning in an age of noise. Dreams, music, and chance encounters act as catalysts, awakening awareness that transcends reason. It is as though the lineage has dissolved into collective consciousness, spreading through humanity like fragrance through air, unseen yet undeniable. Scientists, poets, and philosophers alike begin to sense patterns within chaos, symmetry within apparent disorder. They speak of energy connecting all things, of consciousness shaping reality, of love as the unifying law of existence. These revelations echo the same truths carried by mystics of old, that creation is an expression of unity, and that each being is a reflection of that original harmony. What was once guarded in secrecy now reveals itself through the language of modern understanding. Those who carry the ancient awareness live quietly. They may be teachers, healers, artists, or strangers passing unnoticed through cities. They are not marked by name or blood, but by presence, a calmness that soothes, a gaze that sees without judgment. Around them, life feels less chaotic, as though the air itself adjusts to their stillness. They are living reminders that the sacred lineage was never about inheritance, but about recognition of divinity within all forms. The world of modern faith, fragmented by interpretation, hungers for this return to simplicity. Many sense that beyond doctrines and divisions, a single truth beats like a pulse beneath all belief. In meditation halls, in music that stirs the soul, in acts of compassion, that pulse becomes tangible once more. The bloodline, once thought of as physical, reveals itself as spiritual. Not a stream of genetics, but of awareness flowing quietly through generations of hearts that dare to love beyond reason. Technology, often accused of dimming the sacred, becomes unexpectedly its ally. Through its web of light, messages of awakening travel farther than any pilgrim's path. The same symbols once carved into stone now flash across screens, reinterpreted through art and science alike. Even those who do not understand their origin feel their resonance. The lineage adapts, shape-shifting as it always has, finding new ways to whisper its eternal message. That love is the true inheritance of humanity. Every act of kindness, every word spoken in understanding, every creation born from beauty continues the legacy. It requires no proclamation, no recognition. The bloodline of spirit does not seek acknowledgement, it seeks expression. Each time a human heart remembers its own light, the ancient story retells itself, invisible yet unbroken. When night settles upon modern cities and the noise of machines fades, silence returns. Within that silence, the same voice heard in deserts, monasteries, and cathedrals still speaks, gentle, patient, unchanging. It reminds those who listen that the sacred lineage was never lost, for it lives within the very pulse of existence, waiting only for awareness to awaken. Cathedrals of glass and steel rise now where once stood towers of stone, yet within their geometry echoes the same eternal rhythm. Architects speak of proportion, engineers of strength, but beneath their precision lies something deeper, a continuation of the language once carved by masons and sung by monks. Each structure, when born from vision rather than vanity, becomes a hymn of light and line, revealing through form what cannot be captured by word. Music, too, carries the legacy of the hidden inheritance. Across centuries, from Gregorian chants to symphonic compositions and electronic soundscapes, certain harmonies recur, vibrating with the mathematics of creation. Composers who lose themselves in inspiration often describe hearing rather than inventing, as though melodies already exist, waiting to be remembered. In these resonances lies the memory of that first harmony, when spirit and matter danced as one. Painters of every age return instinctively to sacred ratios, arranging color and form in patterns that soothe the soul. Even abstract art, stripped of religious context, still moves hearts towards silence, reminding them of something beyond comprehension. The brush, the instrument, the blueprint, all serve as vessels for the same message. Divinity is not separate from creation, but embedded within it. Each act of true artistry becomes an echo of the original act of love that brought all things into being. The human eye responds to beauty with recognition, not surprise. When standing before a sculpture or listening to music that stirs tears without reason, what awakens is memory, the remembrance of unity before division. Artists, knowingly or not, act as intermediaries between worlds, translating vibration into vision. Through their creations, the bloodline of wisdom continues, not through name or lineage, but through inspiration shared in every age. Sacred geometry, once encoded in cathedrals and temples, finds new expression in modern design. Spirals, symmetry, and harmonic proportions continue to appear, not by imitation, but by necessity. These shapes, rooted in the mathematics of life itself, form bridges between ancient and contemporary understanding. Whether in the curvature of a bridge or the arrangement of a city square, the same invisible order asserts itself, whispering through proportion that creation still remembers its source. Even those who claim no faith often stand before art and fall silent. Beauty disarms intellect, drawing awareness inward toward mystery. Within that pause, the veil between worlds thins. The same awe once felt by pilgrims in sanctuaries now arises before canvases, melodies, and skylines. The sacred, ever patient, adapts to the languages of each era, using art as its eternal tongue. Museums and concert halls have become new temples, places where the collective spirit gathers to touch something infinite. The lighting of a gallery, the hush before a symphony, the stillness after applause, all mirror the rhythm of ancient ritual. Within these moments, humanity kneels once again before mystery, not through fear, but through wonder. As dusk falls and lights shimmer across the horizon, the city hums with unseen harmony. Within its architecture, its art, its music, the message continues to flow. The sacred never departed, it merely changed its attire. Those who pause long enough to feel it discover that the same pulse guiding the stars moves through every line of beauty ever drawn, every note ever sung. The inheritance of divine memory, long hidden, still whispers through creation, inviting each soul to listen, to remember, to awaken. Night gathers softly around the edges of the world. Stars burn through layers of cloud like memories surfacing from dream, their light crossing centuries to reach the eyes of those who still search for meaning in silence. The journey that began beneath the cross now circles back to where it started, within the human heart. Across millennia of stone, song, and secrecy, the truth has never moved far. It has always remained close, breathing just beneath the rhythm of existence, waiting for recognition. The stories of blood and love, of exile and remembrance, of symbols hidden in cathedrals and whispered through music, all converge here. Not to reveal a single revelation, but to awaken perception itself. For the lineage that has wandered through time is not of flesh alone, but of awareness. Every code in art, every symbol carved into stone, every hymn that lifts the soul beyond words, points toward one realization: divinity has never been elsewhere. It has lived quietly within every human gaze since the beginning. As the world turns through centuries of change, the ancient whisper remains. Those who once protected the secret with oaths and silence did so to preserve the fragile light of understanding until the world could bear it again. That moment has arrived. Humanity stands on the edge of remembrance, where science and spirit no longer war against one another, where knowledge meets awe. The secret that once divided believers and heretics now calls for unity, for it belongs to no order, no temple, no bloodline alone. Imagine standing within a cathedral at twilight, when the last beam of sunlight filters through stained glass. Dust floats like stars in the air, and for a heartbeat, the entire space seems alive, breathing. That moment, fleeting yet eternal, is the revelation itself. The sacred is not distant, it is woven through perception, through every act of love, through the gentle courage of those who remember the light, even in shadow. The true inheritance of the sacred lineage is not royal power or divine privilege, but awareness. The knowledge that creation and creator are inseparable. Those who carried this truth through ages of danger did so not to elevate themselves, but to preserve a vision of humanity capable of awakening. The bloodline is not confined to names or history. It flows through every heart that chooses compassion over fear, understanding over judgment. Through centuries of silence and rediscovery, the message has remained constant. Life itself is the grail, consciousness the vessel, love the wine that fills it. Those who drink from that cup know the meaning of the phrase, hidden in scripture and symbol alike, that the kingdom of heaven is within. This is the treasure sought by knights, guarded by mystics, encrypted by artists. It was never lost. It has only awaited remembrance. As the music fades and the final candle burns low, a stillness descends. Not emptiness, but fullness too vast for sound. The listener, having drifted through deserts, oceans, and cathedrals of time, returns to the quiet of their own breath. That breath is the bridge between earth and eternity, the whisper of the lineage alive within all. Every symbol encountered, every secret unveiled, leads not outward, but inward, toward that single pulse where all mysteries converge. To see the sacred hidden in plain sight is to understand that no revelation is ever external. It is the awakening of perception itself. The story continues not in books or ruins, but in those who live with open eyes, who walk through the ordinary world carrying extraordinary awareness. The cross, the rose, the chalice, the star, each remains part of the same infinite pattern. History has told their stories, but truth invites experience. To feel that truth within one's own breath is to realize that awakening was never a destination. It was always the origin, waiting patiently behind every heartbeat. As night deepens and silence thickens, the listener may rest knowing that the secret bloodline of Jesus was never about heritage, but about humanity's shared divinity. The real treasure lies not beneath stone or within documents, but within the soul that dares to remember. The story does not end. It continues each time love overcomes fear, each time awareness pierces illusion. The mystery lives on, hidden, yet visible to all who have learned to see. If you have journeyed through this story, let its silence remain with you for a while. Allow the images of ancient lands, secret orders, and eternal symbols to settle within, for they are reflections of your own inner landscape. Truth is not an object to be found, but a presence to be felt, and you have touched it simply by listening. Before you drift into rest, take a moment to breathe and reflect on what has been heard. Let the light of awareness move gently through thought and memory, and if this story has stirred something within you, share that light further. Subscribe to the channel to join this ongoing voyage through mystery and memory. Like this film so that its message continues to reach others who wander the same path of quiet wonder. Write a comment to share your reflections, for each word adds to the tapestry of discovery. And share this film with those close to your heart, friends, family, or anyone who might find solace in its sound and story. May the echo of this journey remain with you tonight, guiding your dreams toward peace and awakening. For truth, once remembered, never fades. It simply waits for the next soul to hear its whisper.